Hello, friends of the paranormal. This is your co-host, Stu, and I'm here with the paranormalist, Patty Wilson. Patty, how are you this hot summer day?
I'm actually doing okay. So we've been getting a lot of rain and it's muggy, but I'm inside, so I'm good.
Okay, yeah, me too. So if you see the curtain behind me and you see it waving over here, that's because the air conditioner's on. So
It's not
just
paranormal.
no, pay no attention to the man in front of the curtain. I'm paraphrasing. Um, anyway, we would like to thank all of you for waiting for us. I know it's been several weeks since we've been able to record an episode, and we are back despite some initial technical difficulties for this particular one. I saw that eye roll. That was great. Um, we do thank you for finding us and sticking with us. If you're not a subscriber, please consider subscribing. Click the like or whatever metric that you have on the system that you are viewing or listening to. And in the description of the podcast, you'll find everything Paranormalist Podcast related, including our Facebook groups, our email address, which we would be more than happy to hear from you through any of those means, really. And everything else. I do this every week, so you'd think I would get tired of saying it, but sometimes I like to hear myself talk, I guess. But anyway, this is the point where I say, Patty, what's our topic for today?
Well, our topic for today are going to be historic hauntings, and I'm so excited to tell these stories because. But before we start with the stories themselves, I wanted to say that I have a friend over here. I don't know if they can see it or not, but I have a little friend over here, a little Halloween pumpkin, and I'm not sure if they can see it, but can you see him?
Oh, yes, yes, with the skull in the middle. Is that carved that way? Or is
It's
that?
actually it's actually an animatronic. And
Oh,
before we
okay. All
start
right.
with the ghost stories, I have a story to tell you. So my 6-year-old grandson is he's little blonde hair, blue-eyed little fella, and he's terrified of this guy. So I keep him locked in my storage area, right? And in the back of the camper.
Okay.
And the other morning at 5 o'clock in the morning, my little grandson's sitting here eating breakfast before he goes to where he goes to when I work, because he stays with me some in the week. And anyway, he's sitting there eating, and all of a sudden, this guy who has a little bit of a short in him got hit by my cat in the back room, and he started to talk. So my grandson's got his spoon halfway to his mouth. He begins to shake. His eyes are as big as saucers, and he goes, Grandma, what made that thing talk? And his sister goes, I think the cat hit it. He's like, no, I honestly thought he was going to bolt out the door and run into the woods before I could catch him. It was all I could do. And then I got him out, and my son fixed the short in him. And so we don't have any more possible elopements by my poor 6-year-old grandson who's terrified. He's so intrigued with it, but he's terrified of it. So he's going to be our mascot for this week.
All right. Even though we're a couple months away from Halloween, I thought you were
Honey,
going to
it's
come.
always Halloween.
Oh, I thought you were going to come back with. I took the batteries out and it still did it.
Nope. No, I'll tell you what, since he was a little tiny kid, when he was little and we didn't want him to go out of the room we had all his play toys and stuff in, they would put this in the doorway, and it was better than a gate.
I see. Yeah.
He just wouldn't go anywhere near that thing. So, but anyway, back to hauntings. But I wanted to share that funny little story and explain why he's sitting here in July.
I thought you were going to come up with some kind of crazy Eddie story.
No, 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 not today.
All
So,
right.
yeah. So anyhow, I wanted to share some really interesting classic hauntings. I love history, as all of you guys that have listened for a while know. And I found some really cool, interesting, unusual hauntings. So there's a place called the Dock Street Theater in Charleston, South Carolina. Now, it's in the French Quarter of Charleston, and this building was built in 1736. It was designed exclusively for theatrical performances. Now, the original theater opened to George Farquhar's play, The Recruiting Officer, in February the 12th of 1736. And the very first opera to ever be performed in North America was performed there. The structure made it through to 1740, and it was burnt. during a devastating fire. But the building was rebuilt eventually, and in 1809, the building as it today stands was put in place. Now, it was the site of a place called Planters Hotel, but this building has been renovated, and it is a gorgeous structure. If you ever get anywhere near it, it's gorgeous. And the theater has some really interesting things about it. So the first thing is that it is a theater where some very famous people trod the boards. For example, Junius Booth, who was the brother of John Wilkes Booth, Edwin
Okay.
Booth, his father, and actually one of the first African American actors. It was also a Civil War hero. His name was Robert Smalls, worked at that theater. So I think that's a pretty interesting, history. But the place fell into disrepair, and during the Great Depression, it became part of the WPA project. They were doing works to and taking old buildings and like restoring them and using them for WPA places in order to not tear them down. So it became known as the Dock Street Theater. Obviously, it's on the docks, and it's been renovated a couple times since then. It is a theater once more. It's also kind of a museum. It's a really beautiful place, but that's not what I wanted to talk about. What I wanted to talk about is that the theater has a lot of history and a lot of hauntings. So there are several really interesting ghost stories that are associated with it. One is there of a young woman by the name of Nettie Dickerson, and she was, as they euphemistically put it in the documents, a lady of the night. In the 1800s, she frequented the property when the Planters Hotel was there prior to them rebuilding this building. And supposedly now this is where the story diverges. There was a woman by the name of Nettie Dickerson. She does appear to have been a prostitute. And she died at the Planter Hotel. Now, this is where it diverges. There are a couple different stories. One is that she was struck by lightning one night sitting on the hotel balcony. And the other was that she died due to a complication from a bad abortion. But either way, her ghost is still seen there. And just for those who don't think it's possible to have somebody struck by lightning or have something crazy like that happen, there's a place in Cambria County where a woman was decapitated by fireworks as she was a mistress to a very rich man. And she was along with a bunch of other women who were mistresses. They were kept in a hotel up in Cambria County, and they were watching the 4th of July display when one of the fireworks went rogue, and it literally hit that balcony and decapitated her.
Oh my.
So weird things can happen. So it's not that strange that maybe that would happen. So she has been seen throughout the building. She's particularly seen on the second floor looking out a window, which I don't know if that would have anything to do with, like, maybe she thought she was at the balcony or whatever. But I thought it was interesting. The Junius Booth also is seen um, on the stage. The story is that he was staying at the Planters Hotel when he was working in the area, and that he got angry and literally, I don't think that there was a lot of mental health apparently in the Booth family, because he attacked a hotel manager in a fit of rage and attempted to kill him. Again, some serious mental health problems amongst the boys. And supposedly he's seen wearing a frock coat, a top hat, his knee-high boots, and he's been seen on the stage, in the hallways. People claim that he comes up near them, and like they'll hear somebody walking up and they feel like a person's breath blowing on their neck. They turn to look and there's nobody there, or they see him, but only for a second, and then he fades away. Not exactly how I want to meet a ghost. I mean, it's just kind of creepy to have him breathing on you. So there are lots of stories. The staff there tells stories of footsteps that walk past them. Guests there have talked about it. Seats that sit down on their own, and the auditorium. There's the ones that have the little springs in them, and you stand up and the seat folds automatically. And
Oh
you
yes,
can
yeah.
imagine, what I'm talking about.
Yep.
So you can imagine you're sitting there doing like their blocking and what have you to get ready for a performance, figuring out all of that. And you look out and there's two or three seats sitting down by themselves. And when somebody approaches them, the seats automatically fly up as if somebody stood up.
Mhm.
Those kinds of things. Um, there are shadows seen by the actors in the rooms where they're getting ready for the plays. There are audience members who talk about shadows walking with them. They have two shadows walking with them. They turn to see who's beside them. There's nobody there, and they look, and the second shadow walks on beyond them, and there's nobody there. I can imagine that would be a little bit disconcerting.
A bit.
So, the place has a lot of history. There's over 100 performances in the theater there every year now. So if anybody's interested, you're planning a vacation in that area, check it out. You'll definitely get some entertainment and possibly,
Hmm.
possibly a little bit of a haunting. There's, you can always, take the recorder to a different part of the building and ask some questions on the sly. Or if you go in and they're offering a little tour, you can always step away for a minute and see what you can find out. But it's a beautiful building and I highly recommend it. Now the next one is even older and much more interesting. It is called the Charleston Exchange and Dungeon. Yep, they mean dungeon.
Okay.
They do. They
Hmm.
do. So the place was an exchange building. So this would have been a place where people were going to do business, financial business and stocks and sell crops and stuff like that. They were doing a lot of that sort of thing there. It is a very deeply troubled structure. By the way, this is the one of the most, I think it was the very first stock exchange in the entire country. And it's one of the three most important ones in the history of the state of the country. There's one in Philadelphia, and I forget what the third one was, but this is the first one, and then Philadelphia, and then the next one. So that should give you an idea how important this particular structure was. It was built in 1670. So basically what happened in 1670, there were two British ships that came in. They ended up putting in what we now call Charleston Harbor. And these British ships were looking for places to build a new London. That's exactly what the original letters talk about. They wanted to build another version of London in the New World. So, and I thought it was fascinating. I was doing a lot of reading on this. And so they ended up setting up shop there. They built these buildings. They started putting it all together. However, in Charleston had a lot of problems that London apparently wasn't suffering too much from at that moment in time because this was a new world, so this was a lot more rough and ready, if you would. So they began to have problems with pirates. Uh, you know, there was a lot of piracy going on in the 16 and early 1700s. In fact, for those who don't know it, privateers are basically pirates that signed a government contract to go and pirate the enemy ships. So the British government signed privateer contracts with people, and you could have come from anywhere in the world, that you would attack French ships. The Americans would eventually sign the same types of contracts to attack British ships, and they were called privateers. And in exchange for being allowed to keep all the booty and them getting rid of the ships for their enemies, they also would be given clemency, pardon at the end of the war. And some of them became businessmen, but some of them did not. This one, however, has a really interesting set of stories. So underneath the old exchange, there was something called the Half Moon Battery. It was later called the Court of the Guard. It was built in 1718. It was a dungeon below the battery, and it literally ended up being used for captives, pirate captives, prisoners of war, things like that. Blackbeard is said to have been captured and housed there. And there was another gentleman pirate, so he would have most likely been a privateer, Stede Bonnet, who also was there. Now, Blackbeard was, we do know that Blackbeard did a blockade of Charleston Harbor. He captured some local prominent citizens and then told the city what he wanted in exchange for their surrender, for them to get back their hostages. And what he wanted was money, financially, he wanted something, but he also wanted a great deal of medicine because a lot of his dudes had the clap.
Oh, okay.
So, venereal disease was running rampant. And so he wanted the medication that they had at the time for this. They did settle with him with money and the medicine. And he sent back the prominent citizens and removed his blockade of the harbor. Those who don't know it, Blackbeard had more than one ship. I believe at one point he had 4 total. The Queen Anne is the ship most associated with him because that was the one he privately captained, but he had multiple other ships. So he could do a blockade because he could put, 4 ships out there with cannons and it would just take out anything that tried to come in and out of the harbor. So anyhow, he got caught, and Stede Bonnet also would get caught. He and Blackbeard teamed up and they were robbing ships along Cape Fear. They finally got caught and were put into the dungeons there. There's a really interesting story about Stede, that he dressed up as a woman, that an old woman came in, said she was the mother of Stede and she wanted to see him. What she was hiding under her clothing was another set of women's clothing. And when he was in the room with her, she gave him the clothes and he put them on. They were very much like his cloak, like what she was wearing. And she stepped back where the guards couldn't see her very well, and he took her place and walked out of the jail.
Okay, that poses all kinds of questions because people of that, or men of that time frame, probably had a good deal of facial hair.
Yes, but if you
So,
pulled that hood right up, that cape,
I guess so.
you might be able in the dark or something to
Mhm.
um you know hide it. But anyhow, that's what he did, and he might have been clean shaven. I don't know. I never saw a sketch or a painting of him. He was, however, kept there and tried and sentenced and hung, outside of it. So this place was really, there were multiple people who were there that ended up dying for their deeds there. Now, the British Parliament, because everything back in the 16 and early 1700s would be British, not American. So when we're thinking about it, we all know about the Boston Tea Party in 1773. What we don't know, as a general rule, and this is one of the things I found interesting, is that 3 months prior to the Boston Tea Party, in Charleston, the entire city of Charleston voted to not allow the East India Company to sell their goods in Charleston any longer. And so because of that, they became enemies of the crown, if you would. And there was one particular person, Isaac Hayne, who was a businessman. He wasn't necessarily pro-British, but he was willing to work with them. He was a British citizen at that time. All Americans were British citizens at that time, or they were Dutch citizens or something like that, but they were definitely not American. And when the East India Company brought in the 257 chests of tea, they were turned back, which made everybody angry. The commander at the in Charleston, he started asking around trying to figure out who the bad guys were, the people that were causing trouble. So Hayne was married. He had 1745, and he got married, and he was really well off. He was married a rich woman. He was a rich man, so they had a really nice life. And he tried to play nice with the British, but underneath it all, he was a rabble rouser, trying to, support this idea of independence. So he gets captured, and he attempts to ask for leniency, to argue for a continuance, to try to get like stays of execution, but he's sentenced to be killed. The last 36 hours of his life were spent in a room that's now called the Haynes room, the Isaac Haynes room at the battery. And the commander wanted to remind him that there was no going back. So he had the casket built, and for the last 36 hours of his life, he locked Haynes in the room with his own casket.
Kind of macabre. All right.
He was
Mhm.
proving a point, if you know what I mean. So what ends up happening is Hayne is executed. Now he's going to show up again because he's one of the main ghosts there. They estimate that there's probably 15 to 20 entities that have been encountered there. The first was one of the first ones, and one of the ones that they know the most about was the gentleman, um, Steve Bonet, who supposedly is seen. There's interesting stories. I was listening to some people that work there talk, and they were talking. There's one gentleman in particular who was saying that, he goes in, the dungeon is now a museum. The
Okay.
basement dungeon
Mhm.
area is now a museum. So he goes in, and they're in colonial garb. They go in, get dressed into their costumes, and they take people through and tell stories and reenact things and what have you. So on one particular day, he's in there and he's getting dressed in his garb and what have you, and he hears somebody out in the hallway. He opens the door just a bit, and he sees another person in colonial garb, and he assumes, because he can't see him very well, that this is another one of the tour guides. So he hurries up and gets his stuff on, and he comes out, and the tour guide, who should have been the only person who was in there with him, because they hadn't opened yet, comes hurrying down the hall in his modern day clothes, and he says, "Hey, I'm sorry. I was running a little bit late. I'll hurry up and get dressed. Who can you catch the first tour?" And he's like, "Who the heck was that?" And since then, they've had multiple other encounters with this particular spirit, Steve Bonet, and they believe it's him because there were sketches of him and stuff like that, and the sketches show him in very much the same clothing with high boots and the whole 9 yards. And it was interesting to him because he said, "I didn't like I was hurrying because I thought I was the running late, so I really wasn't paying attention. But later on, I got to thinking, high boots. None of us wear high boots. Why didn't I take note of that at the time?" But they've seen him shuffling down the hallways, entering the dungeon area multiple times. There's also a lot of tourists and a lot of people who've worked there who claim that they've heard screaming and cries and moans as if somebody's in a lot of pain. That would be a very probable thing to have happened. You could see somebody getting beaten or shot or something and drug in there, and they're laying there, sick and in pain. We didn't have the anesthesias like we have today and things like that, and they probably lay there till either they were executed or they died. There are reports of seeing chains swinging by unseen forces. There's chains like, they would have shackled people, so they have chains on the walls, and the chains will rattle and move on their own.
Chains being pretty heavy. Yeah, probably not wind, but
Yeah,
yeah.
no,
Mhm.
it's a dungeon. It's underground, so there's not
Mhm.
going to be a lot of air moving. There's a lot of people who talk about capturing what they call dancing orbs or multiple orbs, chilly spots, cold spots, things like that. And this is kind of a creepy one. And so there's a lot of the tourists in particular have had these bizarre encounters with something that grabs their throat,
Oh,
like chokes them, or shoves them really hard and knocks them down. The tour guides will actually warn you that, if you have this, feeling, let us know. We'll get you out of here. We don't want anything to happen. Nobody's been injured severely, but it's a very disconcerting feeling when it happens. And so they do, take time to talk about that. Now, obviously, there's, a lot of other stories that go along with it. But this place just has a really interesting history. It's still there. It's still used. It's got an amazing history. The architecture is insane. It's beautiful Georgian style architecture. And if you get a chance, you should check it out because it's really, really amazing. And I did a book on haunted North and South Carolina, and I did some research on this property for that. And it's one of my favorite spots when you get to that part of the Carolinas. So the next one is a place I really love. I've been there multiple times. It is a cool as crap place. So it's the House of the Seven Gables. Nathaniel Hawthorne made it famous in the book, The House of the Seven Gables. And it is built, his story is loosely formed around some historical events. Like you can piece together the house from the architecture. They know what house he was going to. It's plainly clear. The one character in the House of Seven Gables was an old woman, and he actually had a relative who lived there, who was an elderly woman. He would go and visit, so he loosely shaped it around those things. I have been in the house, and it's the first thing you notice about the House of Seven Gables is it's not a Southern mansion. So in the South, all the houses from that time period were large with high ceilings because they didn't have a lot of heating issues. In the North, even really well-to-do people's homes were small, 7-foot high ceilings. They kept everything compact because heat was a big issue in the North. So when you walk into it, you're expecting this grandiose mansion, and you're like, dude, this isn't it at all. It's like a large cottage, but it's cool. It's a really cool place to check out. So the House of the Seven Gables was built in 1668 by Captain John Turner. It was the Turner Mansion at that time, or the Turner House, and it wasn't named the House of the Seven Gables until Nathaniel Hawthorne's novel. It really just went by the name of the owner until then. And John Turner realized that he was a successful businessman. He was a sea captain, but he figured he would die at sea. A lot of people did, and he was doing really well in Puritan New England, and he he eventually got a will together because he was, I don't know, like most other people, he was afraid he was going to die and leave everything, and you know whoever the powers that be were, they would take it. That's still the problem now. We got the government taking everything when we pass away if we don't have all our paperwork. So it was the same thing for him. He left it to his wife, who was a widow Redford, and he ensured that all of his stepchildren, which I thought was very kind of him, he had none of his own, so he has ensured that his stepchildren would inherit the mansion. Again, mansion's a relative term in this instance because it's not a mansion by our standards today. So he ends up, the house passes on down through the family. And then in 1692, we have the Salem witch trials. And one of Nathaniel Hawthorne's forefathers was one of the judges for the Salem witch trials. In fact, Nathaniel Hawthorne's name was spelled differently than it is today. He literally was so enamored with his ancestor that he changed the spelling of Hawthorne from the way his family spelled it to the way this old man had spelled it back then. So when you see HAW for Hawthorne, it was actually not spelled that way. It was HAY, I believe. And so he did change the spelling of his name because of that. So anybody who doesn't know, the Salem witch trials were, like 150 people approximately were accused of being witches. They were mostly named by other people. The vast majority of them were named because they had property. So in the time frame, if you were convicted of witchcraft, you lost your property. So you could see how people that didn't like you, or people who coveted your property, could benefit from this, and the sheriff could take your property. And so he would take it and he would write it off in his name. So he was a really busy man making a lot of money. In fact, he was so unpopular in the town of Salem, and it wasn't Salem, the city we know of there now. It's actually a town a few miles away called Salem Town. So if we go to Salem, Massachusetts, they're the ones that get associated with it, but they're not where the original witch trials took place. They took place several miles away in a place called Salem Town. Anyhow, this guy, the sheriff, was so unpopular that his family had to bury him in the basement of his home when he died because they were afraid that people would desecrate the body. Of all the people who were convicted, if you were convicted, you were not hung. Nobody was burned at the stake in Salem. There were hangings, all of them. And if you confessed, you didn't get hung. You lost everything, but you got to leave the town with your life. The ones who were hung were the ones who refused to confess. Now, along with that, you should know that one of the people that was accused of being a witch was a 4-year-old little girl and 2 dogs.
Dogs. Okay.
It's not the first time. I think I'm not sure if it's Franklin or Fulton County. It's because it's right on the border. There were 2 dogs hung there for witchcraft as well. And I could tell you other places where that's happened. So it's not a totally shocking thing. So, as I said, most of the people left. The house, they left in the area and it left kind of a blight on the house. The house becomes the Turner Ingersoll Mansion. And it is at that time, when it's sold to Captain Samuel Ingersoll, that Nathaniel Hawthorne finally encounters it. So Hawthorne becomes friends with Ingersoll's daughter, Susanna. He made notes of the design every time he'd visit her. He made all these different fictional leaps based off the house, the grounds, the history, all of that. So that's how that all came into being. And Susanna is one of the most well-known entities at the house. So they don't deliberately tell you the house is haunted, but she is seen often throughout the house. And there's also a little boy. There's no record of a little boy dying in the house, but they had servants. It could very well have been a servant's child because the child only is seen in the attic. And in that time frame, the house servants would have slept in the attic. But he's a little bit of a mischievous fella, and he likes to run around the attic and pull little pranks and things like that. There are a ton of stories of lights turning themselves on and off, of water coming out of faucets, like they're turning themselves on when there's somebody standing there watching. People talk about feeling somebody following them, hearing footsteps behind them. There was a woman who took a tour who claimed she saw the little boy playing upstairs and she tried to capture him in a photograph. One of the weird things I found when I went there was that they have signs up everywhere that you're not allowed to take pictures anymore because the flashes supposedly damaged the historical objects. So it must have predated that because I know that there were signs everywhere that we weren't allowed to be able to take any photographs. There's also a hidden room or hidden rooms that were discovered in the house. There's a dining room where musicals and plays were hosted, and an accounting room, which was written about in Hawthorne's novel. And there's a lot of stories about, people being seen. There is actually probably the most popular entity there is Susanna. So, but it just has a lot of really cool stories, a lot of history. If you really want to get a feeling for that time frame, go there. When I was there, they still have the cobblestone streets in certain areas of the city, of the town. The cemetery where the and the area where Giles Corey was pressed to death. Giles Corey was the only, I think he's the only man in the 25. And the story goes that he had turned his wife in as a witch, and then somebody else turned him in as a witch, and he refused to confess. So the sheriff had him pressed to death. What they did is they tied him out and put rocks on his chest. And if he would say, the sheriff would come up to him and say, okay, now will you confess? And he would say, more weight, until he basically was his chest was crushed. He's there. It's really historic in a lot of ways. Very fascinating. There's some really cool hotels there. There's history that runs from the witch trials all the way up through Houdini used to go there. His widow held seances there to try to communicate with Houdini for most of the rest of her life after he died. There's a hotel there that hosted it, and they have a whole suite of rooms there that are not open to the public anymore, but I got to see them because they found out I write ghost stories, and they were nice to me. And so it's got a ton of history. I just highly recommend, if you're going to go, check out a place. That is the only place I've ever been to that I'll tell you I would go to 10 more times.
Yeah, especially really, if you got the perks.
We were there and we were like just doing the tourist stuff, my best friend and I, and then we got this note and it said, we came back and there was a note on the door and it said, hey, we heard that you write ghost books, so we moved you to the haunted suite. And I went down to talk to them and thank them, and they said, hey, would you like to see the suite where Houdini's wife had the seances? And they showed us all of that. And there's a penthouse on the top that is not used and not open to the public anymore, but it's supposed to be haunted. So it was really cool too. But if you ask, the staff there was very accommodating, not just to me, they were accommodating to others as well. Mm-hmm. And it was a really cool place. So I highly recommend it. This last story is by far going to be my favorite. So anybody who knows me well knows I have a real fixation on Aaron Burr, the guy who was the vice president for Jefferson.
Mm-hmm. Oh, the Aaron famous duel, or the infamous duel.
The famous duel. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But we're going to talk a little bit about some of that. So the famous duel. So Aaron Burr was a young lawyer. His wife, Theodosia, gave birth to their only child, and she died soon thereafter. And so he became a single parent. Now, in that time frame, they would normally have just hired a governess, and the man would have gone about doing his thing and been a kind of an occasional father. But Aaron Burr wasn't that dude. Aaron Burr absolutely adored his daughter, and he poured a ton of love into her. He was a scrappy dude. He was arrogant, he could be pompous, but with Theodosia, she was the reason he breathed. He gave her a classical man's education. She was articulate, she was talented in so many ways, and he was so proud of her. So he had only one really seriously close relationship. Now, that's going to tie into why he has the duel later on in life. So Aaron Burr's father was a minister. And he was contacted by another minister who wanted a young man to go to college, to school, and stay at the Burr family home, because this young man, Alexander Hamilton, was a orphan at the time, at the age of 12 or 13. I think his mom died. His father had ran away and left him. He was the bastard child of a woman who had left her husband for an Irish sea captain, and the Irish sea captain stayed long enough to have a couple kids and then bailed off for better, sailed off to other harbors and left her. But Hamilton's aunt was well married, and they took him and his brother in, and he was a clerk at the age of 13 and 14 at a shipping agency. And that's where he comes in contact eventually with the people who decide that he's worth investing in. And so they want to send him to college, and they reach out to him, to Burr's father. So these two men knew each other for a long, long time. They were approximately similar in age. So they knew each other a long time. And it was a rivalry from the get-go. Burr did not like him. Hamilton thought that Burr was arrogant and pompous, and like he had that little man syndrome thing going, kind of a deal. And they hated each other from the get-go. Anyway, so his estate is what we're really talking about. I could go on about the history of Aaron Burr for like hours, but I'll spare you all. So his estate is part of his estate is now a restaurant called One If by Land and Two If by Sea. So it's part of the original, the buildings are part of the original estate. And it's interesting because I can't even imagine. Like, this is a place I will be. I hate to say that because it's New York City. Maybe someday, if they ever calm down and get their heads together, I'd love to go there and see this place because my love of the history of Aaron Burr and what I think happened versus what they say happened um, would make it a very interesting place for me to go to. Anyhow, at this restaurant, the One If by Land and Two If by Sea, they have encountered both Aaron and Theodosia. Now, Aaron, as I said, he loved his daughter. His daughter was married to the governor of South Carolina, and they had a little boy who was ill. And Aaron and the governor and Theodosia spent a fortune trying to save his leg. Okay, but it didn't work out. So they were all heartbroken because that was the only child and what have you. Theodosia is her ending is a mystery and maybe has something to do with why she haunts. So Theodosia was on board a ship going out into international waters to meet her father, who had already had his duel with Hamilton, which is what everybody tells you is the reason he fled the country and couldn't come back to the United States. But that's not the reason. The reason he fled the country is because he committed treason. He tried to undermine the purchase of Texas and steal Texas from the United States and start his own country. And anybody that doesn't believe that can go to a place called Blennerhassett Island in West Virginia, and you'll see where Blennerhassett was the guy that he was in cahoots with. They were using this island as a staging ground. They had men and guns and stuff coming in, and a friend of Jefferson's came to the area, realized something was going on, heard some crazy stories, and got a hold of Jefferson and said, "Hey, you might want to check that vice president of yours because he's doing some really hanky crap." And that's how the whole thing came down. So that's why he fled, not because he had killed Hamilton. Hamilton was famous for duels, and he had only gone after Hamilton because Hamilton had made a vulgar slur against him that Burr's interest in his daughter Theodosia was unnatural, which insulted Burr to his core, and that's why he took up the duel. And as I said, he had by then lost his daughter. She was on board a ship going out into international water to meet her dad, and the ship was attacked by pirates, and nobody knows for sure exactly where or how she died. There is a story that there was an island that these pirates were using not far away where they were taking captives, and that she walked into the water and drowned herself rather than be raped by one of them. So Burr was devastated, and then Hamilton made these rude comments and what have you. But anyhow, there's also the speculation that Theodosia is seen at the place, and it might be because this was the only place she was ever happy. Not that she didn't love her husband, but it was marred by the sickness of their child for so many years, and then his eventual passing. And so the only place in her life which was peaceful and fun and happy had been at her father's home. There are a ton of stories of flickering lights, unexplained noises, seeing Burr and his daughter walking through the restaurant and the quarters where it's all at. There's one of the things I find interesting is that Theodosia is the person they say does this, that the earrings will disappear off of the women in the restaurant as though she's pilfering the earrings. And others will talk about feeling little tugs on their earrings, and they'll be like, looking to see who's there, and there's nobody there, but she seems to like jewelry a lot. and she attempts to take some of it, or to at least finger it and look at it. There are reports of mysterious shoves. We're not sure who that is. Employees talk about seeing the shadow of a woman in a ball gown that they assume is Theodosia. The equipment will malfunction, turn itself on, turn itself off, things like that, even though it's been taken care of, and it's in good repair. The property was purchased by John Jacob Astor, and there it includes a carriage house, a brothel, and the pub that now is the restaurant. During Astor's time, but during Burr's time, it was truly his private residence for him and his daughter, and he had several servants that were there. So I just thought it was really an interesting place. Now, during Astor's time, there were as I said, there was a house of ill repute, so there was prostitution going on. There were some gruesome deaths. Some of the ghosts there's an estimate of 20 ghosts haunt this property. Some of them are believed to be courtesans who had been prostitutes for the Astor family and had died in various ways, none of which were natural, shall we say. Maitre d's have resigned because they've been shoved going up or down the stairs by invisible hands. There's a poltergeist activity that goes on throughout the building, and it's just a really interesting building. Also beautiful, by the way. I think you can go online and kind of tour it. It's got some really interesting secretive feature. There's a hidden stone-lined passageway that was used to get to the Hudson River. It was believed it was used for bringing goods in and helping with getting Revolutionary War soldiers during the Revolution, with getting soldiers in and out without the British seeing them. And it's also speculated it was used during the before the American Civil War for the Underground Railroad. It's a fascinating, interesting place. It became a movie theater at one point, and then the restaurant was opened there. And I just thought it was a really cool place. And the story is really fascinating. Again, I know it's probably because of Aaron Burr, but it's just an interesting structure, an interesting history, going all the way from, on one hand, Burr, who was very conservative in a lot of ways, to the Astor family with their flaunting their prostitutes and their illegal gambling and what have you. And there seems to be stuff up and down the whole place. The one entity of the other entities that's consistently coming there, they'll see a woman in a long black dress, very beautifully, groomed and what have you in the time frame, mid 1800s, they think, judging from the clothing. She's very royal looking. She's very haughty. And she stands at the top of the stairs and then begins to descend and suddenly falls. You hear a scream and she's just gone. There was a woman who broke her neck going down the stairs to a dinner party one night. So there's speculation she might be it. The most interesting was there's some Ziegfeld Folly girls who were brought there for parties. A couple of them seem to be coming back to the place, and a blacksmith who had worked there shoeing horses has been seen. And there's a dancer who haunts what they now call the Constitution Room. It's the variety of hauntings in this place is just fascinating to me. And it's an amazing mansion. They've got a hallway that looks like it goes, I don't know, an eighth of a mile. It's insanely long, and it's got the most ornate woodwork, huge arched ceilings. It's like something you would see in a cathedral. I probably couldn't afford to go there, but I would probably do it just once. It's amazingly beautiful place. So anyway, I thought that I would share that with you. It's just an amazingly beautiful place. And with that, I'm going to end it for tonight. And if you guys like history, you want to hear some more really cool historic hauntings, maybe check them out when you get a chance to go for vacations and stuff, please do so. I'm focusing on an episode on the land between the lakes. We had a gentleman who had asked about if maybe I would do something on that. Looking at doing that, starting to piece my pieces together. Doing an episode on haunted cemeteries. I'm fascinated with haunted cemeteries, so that's kind of coming up. Also collecting some very odd Bigfoot stories. I'm going to present a theory that um, in one of the upcoming episodes that maybe everything is related. Like the UFOs aren't a separate field of research from Bigfoot, which is not separate from poltergeist, which is not separate from demonics, which is not separate from ghosts. And when I figure out how to make this thing flow and make sense, I plan to tell the stories. But still working on how to piece the pieces together right to make it entertaining and interesting.
So Patty's unified paranormal theory.
Well, actually, there are some really famous paranormal researchers, whether they were, when I say paranormal, they could have been in the field of ufology or they could be in the field of demonics, and the fields began to cross over. Okay.
Okay.
And they began to realize that this is the same phenomena presenting itself in different guises.
Interesting.
So I wanted to go into that, but I have about a half of a PhD worth of information to sort through yet, guys. So I've been doing this for 5 months, just so if you ever think that the stories sound like they're all put together quickly, I promise you, some of my episodes will have like 200 pages of background research, and this seriously, I could write a dissertation on it. It's just insane what I've learned, and I'm still piecing together because it goes all the way from religion to Satanism. When I say Christian religion to Satanism, and it's all interwoven in into the same beings doing things just differently to attract different people. And I've heard some interesting bits and pieces on it, but there's this guy who wrote a book recently, 4 years ago, and he's building on the research of previous researchers, Jacques Vallée, people like that. And he's created a term for it. I can't wait to share all this with you guys. It's really amazing. But anyhow, that's where we're at. So if you're interested, you want to hear any of this stuff, if you want to send something like the gentleman who sent the request for stories on the Land Between the Lakes, let me know.
And
And
we did have another a comment recently. When I put out a notice that it was going to, we were going to be able to record again, after not being able to, and somebody had asked about a second Q&A episode as well. So
yes,
I don't, that's maybe something to think about.
yeah, if you guys have questions and stuff, start sending them in and just title it at the top Q&A. We'll start gathering the questions up and be happy to do an episode like that. Even if it's, it doesn't have to be about us, be just questions about something that happened to you in the paranormal world or, stuff like that as well. Please feel free. Had a lifetime of doing this stuff. So if I don't know, I'll tell you I don't know. If I do, I'll answer your question to the best of our ability. So with that, I will say good night.